If you want to train people on your team to be great interviews, there's a few things that you're up against. One of them is the misnomer that people who are experienced in doing the job and maybe can do the job extremely well are qualified to evaluate other people. And this is not the case. If you've been around a while, you've probably seen experienced people show up to an interview and not really get a whole lot of insight and maybe actually dangerously index on the wrong things, such as likability, and think that the person can do the job. Another, when you're training someone, is the challenge that people get to know each other differently. So there is not one right way to interview. There's a lot of ways to interview. There's a lot of ways to make friends. And I would propose to you that a good interview is, in a lot of ways, the process of beginning a friendship. And what do I mean by friendship? Because a lot of people are going to react and say, well, this is business, this isn't friendship. Real high quality employment, one denoted by high performance and tenure and retention and people's happiness, delighted customers, depends on people liking each other, trusting each other, wanting to work with each other, admiring each other, respecting each other. And there's a lot of similarities with friendship in those things, right? So how an interviewer goes about setting the stage for this relationship is a pretty big deal. And so when you've got new interviewers who maybe see their role a little bit more hierarchical, they're evaluating a candidate, they often don't understand the context and the way in which they are supposed to relate to these candidates is actually one as more of a peer, an insightful, curious, maybe skeptical peer, but a peer nonetheless, not a superior. And so taking the ego out of interviewing is extraordinarily important. So just because somebody has experience does not mean that they're qualified to interview. And interviewers come about developing relationships in different ways. Some people feel very comfortable starting off the interview, framing it, and getting straight into heavy duty questions. Other people will do small talk. None of that is right or wrong. It needs to be authentic to you. And so one of the things you want to do when you're helping an interviewer find their style is have them think about their self-awareness and their authenticity and who are they as a person and what kind of things are they particularly sensitive to and interested in when it comes to interviewing. Another area where interviewers often struggle is getting high quality, high definition information. Often questions are closed-ended questions, yes or no. They're weak questions. They're not insightful. They're not asking follow-up questions. And the more you can get them feeling accountable for the quality of insight that they come out of the interview with, the more they're going to understand what their job truly is. So how do you do that? First, you send them in with a prep. You send them in with a job. This is the candidate. This is what's already been covered in the interview process. Here's what we still need to discover. And here's your job in all of this. And this is important because they need guardrails. We're not talking about our passion in snowboarding. It doesn't really matter too much whether or not we have a shared passion there. What really matters is, can they do this job? Will they do the job? Will they enjoy doing the job? Will they enjoy working with the team? Will the team enjoy working with them, etc., right? And so if you give them limited bounds, like let's say you've got a PE coming in to sit on a superintendent interview, have that PE ask questions about the area that's their domain, right? RFIs, submittals, change orders, plan updates, etc., right? Procore usage, whatever it is. Give them a domain where they're supposed to assess this person's fit for the organization in this area, and they're going to be the expert on it. What you don't want is, hey, come out of the interview, ask an ambiguous, broad question of like, what did you think of them? That's not a helpful question for them. They need specific bounds. They need to have a responsibility to evaluate the candidate in this criteria. And then before you talk about it, they need to provide written evaluation. And the reason a written evaluation is so important, and they should know, by the way, what the rubric is going into it. This isn't a pop quiz. But because that actually makes them accountable for being a quality interviewer. The mistake a lot of interviewers make is they don't make themselves accountable for real insight. So what is this thing that we're doing in interviewing? We are trying to figure out who we're going to give a lot of responsibility to. This person is going to manage a lot of stress, a lot of liability, a lot of opportunity. If we get this wrong, there's a lot of fallout. But If we don't make ourselves accountable for asking all of the insightful questions, doing all the due diligence, ensuring fit, underwriting the fit as an interview team, we're not really doing our jobs. And so written evaluation at the end before you discuss is important because it makes everyone aware that they're responsible for the quality of their insight from the interview. This makes people pay attention on a whole nother level than if there's not written feedback. It's like a class where there's not going to be a test. You may not pay attention. If you know there's a test, you'll pay attention, and you'll pay attention in certain ways. A good interview strategy has roles and assignments just like a good project. You have people staying in their lanes, not crossing lanes. Imagine a highway. And if you have, let's say your interview team is 4 people, if you don't establish markers of who's covering what, you're going to have people swerving all over this highway of interviewing. It's going to be a confusing experience for the candidate. It's going to be redundant. It's not going to cover as much ground. And you're going to have blind spots in your interview that you're going to find out about later that can cost you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And so sometimes people push back on us when we encourage them, provide written feedback. But the reason is, if you are serious about interviewing, written feedback forces you to be a disciplined interviewer. This is something that I do in our own firm. We do exactly the same process that we do with clients, where we have written feedback before we discuss, and then we discuss the written feedback and how it differs. It's not bad for a new interviewer to not catch things that the senior interviewers do. Of course they are. People are going to pick up on different things. You want an abundance of perspective, different perspective. And when it's written, when it's high resolution, when it's detailed, when you encourage people to think through specific interview debrief questions to themselves and write down their answers, you will get higher quality feedback. The other benefit of writing all this down with a new interviewer is they can start to recognize how the candidate showed up, how they evaluated them, and then if you hire the person, how did they actually perform? There's a continuity in the written record that you can evaluate for finding blind spots in your interview process. The people who don't track their interview processes don't know where the blind spots are. They have blind spots. They don't know where they are. Those blind spots cost them millions and millions of dollars. It's unseen friction. It's easily displaced. The accountability for these mistakes is easily displaced onto the candidate. Well, the candidate isn't who they said they were, and interviewers fundamentally don't take responsibility, and this cycle continues. Many businesses don't grow because they cannot grow their quotient of interviewing skill in their team. This is a big deal for an owner who needs to be able to delegate these kind of responsibilities to the team and know that the team really knows what they're doing. They know what they're evaluating. They know how to interview to core values. They know how to interview to the job description. And there's a level of accountability that's built into the process with written feedback. And those interviewers, let's say they hire the candidate and the candidate doesn't work out. The first people that the interviewers look at is themselves, and they look at their data and they look at the actual performance of the candidate, and they recognize there's a gap here. I failed to ask questions. I failed to follow up on things. I failed to probe deep enough. I failed to assess in some way the performance of this candidate for the job, right? Expectation. I mean, there's so many things. Expectation setting can be another big one. New interviewers often don't feel this weight. They don't understand that this is a moment where in a few hours you might decide to put $500,000 or $1 million or many millions of dollars worth of liability in somebody's lap. And making sure that that person is qualified and aligned for that task is incredibly important. And so when seasoned professionals push back, keep pushing and explain, here's why we do this. This is important. And if they don't want to do it, I would recommend don't involve them in the interview process. Unaccountable leaders interviewing, they don't bring a lot, and they actually bring a lot of risk. This process will inherently start training a new interviewer. They'll see, here's the heuristic, here's what I should be looking for. They'll see the more experienced interviewers picking up on things, and they'll learn they'll absorb that information and develop as interviewers, and then keep them involved in the interview process. They need reps. One of the challenges with becoming a great interviewer is most companies aren't hiring at a really high cyclic rate. They're not interviewing every single week. But if you can get somebody that kind of experience where they're constantly going in, they're following a process, they have a lane to stay in, they have written feedback, and they can rep this over and over again. They can develop self-awareness, give them personality assessments, the same personality assessments you give candidates, give them to your interviewers. Encourage your interviewers on the same path of self-awareness that you should be on. This will develop people into better interviewers, bringing accountability to your organization for its ability to hire high-quality people and then retain those people. In one sense, it doesn't matter if you can hire A players. If you can't keep them, doesn't matter, right? Hiring and retaining are two different things. A players don't like working for B quality organizations. So having your people attuned to this problem of how do we get the highest quality people in there? How do we assess for them? Helps them then look back at the business that they're a part of and recognize there's other areas this business can improve. The burden on the business is significant. It's a very big stress test when you hire somebody, and they need to help get this right. Hope this is helpful to you. I'm trying to grow this YouTube channel. I'd love to encourage more participation. If you have questions or thoughts, suggestions, please put them in the comments, like, subscribe. That all helps us out a lot and encourages me to keep making these videos. Thank you.